Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Once upon a time there lived a beautiful princess named Snow White. Her stepmother, who was the queen, was a vain and wicked creature. She wanted to hide Snow White's beauty from the world out of jealousy. One day, her magic mirror told her that Snow White was fairer than she. Therefore, she ordered the huntsman to kill Snow White. The huntsman was shocked, but she was the queen. What could he do? The next day, he took Snow White into the woods. But the huntsman couldn't bring himself to kill her. He confessed that her stepmother wanted her dead and urged her to run away as far as she could. In the forest, she befriended the animals living there. The next day, she continued on with her new friends in the forest, and suddenly they noticed a small house by the brook, so they went over to it. As she approached the house, she saw that its occupants were not at home. She thought they must live there because there was a huge mess inside. She thought that since she had already settled into the small house, she would clean it with the help of the animals and cook food for the inhabitants of the cottage. After she finished and got tired, she lay down in one of the 7 beds to sleep. Meanwhile, the 7 dwarfs were working in the jewel mine. After the exhausting day, they started their journey back home. However, they didn't expect what awaited them at home. The lights were on in the house. When they opened their door, you can imagine their surprise when their cottage glistened with cleanliness. A beautiful young lady lay in the bed. Snow White bolted awake. The 7 dwarfs could tell she was as surprised as they were. When everyone calmed down, they started to tell their stories. After the entertainment, they had dinner, but before that, everyone had to wash their hands. Then they closed their eyes to sleep. Meanwhile, in the castle, the queen interrogated the mirror again to find out who was the fairest of them all. And it revealed that the huntsman gave her the heart of a wild boar, and Snow White was still alive. She immediately began her spells. She transformed herself into an ugly old woman, unrecognizable to Snow White, and prepared a poisoned apple. The mirror showed for her Snow White living in the cottage of the 7 dwarfs. Then she set off into the forest to give the poisoned apple to Snow White. She accepted the apple. The animals knew what the wicked stepmother was planning and immediately ran to the 7 dwarfs to alert them. But it was too late. Snow White had already been poisoned. One day the prince rode to the dwarf's house and found Snow White in the coffin. The prince leaned over and kissed her. At once Snow White's eyes opened. Before long they were married and lived happily ever after. Snow White and the 7 dwarfs.